Neil Percival Young was born on November 12, 1945 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. His father, Scott Young, was a renowned journalist and sports writer whose work often took him across Canada. His mother, Edna Young, was a homemaker with a nurturing and artistic spirit. Neil's early years were marked by family upheavals and significant health challenges, experiences that would profoundly shape his worldview and creative output. In 1951, Neil's life took a dramatic turn when he contracted polio during an epidemic that swept through North America. The illness left him with a permanent limp, a physical reminder of his resilience. During his recovery, Neil found solace in music, developing an appreciation for melodies and storytelling. This period instilled in him a sense of determination and an ability to channel personal struggles into creative expression. Neil's family moved frequently due to his father's career, exposing him to various cultures and musical styles. However, this itinerant lifestyle also created instability. By 1957, his parents divorced, and Neil moved with his mother to Winnipeg, Manitoba. The divorce was a pivotal moment in Neil's life as he became more introspective and found refuge in music. He often credited his mother's encouragement and belief in his creative potential as instrumental in his early development. In Winnipeg, Neil's exposure to rock and roll ignited his musical passion. The rebellious energy of Elvis Presley, the poetic lyrics of Johnny Cash, and the rhythmic ingenuity of Chuck Berry captivated him. These artists became early influences, shaping Neil's understanding of the power of music to connect deeply with listeners. Neil began experimenting with instruments, starting with a ukulele his mother bought him. The simplicity of the ukulele allowed him to explore melodies and harmonies, setting the foundation for his future as a multi-instrumentalist. His first attempts at songwriting were modest, but they revealed his innate ability to craft lyrics that resonated with emotional authenticity. As a young teenager, Neil's musical tastes expanded to include a diverse range of genres. The heartfelt ballads of Hank Williams, the bluesy grooves of Jimmy Reed, and the rhythmic innovation of Little Richard captivated him. This eclectic mix of influences planted the seeds for Neil's unique style, which would later defy categorization and blend elements of folk, rock, country, and blues. During his high school years in Winnipeg, Neil's musical ambitions grew. He formed his first band, the Jades, with a group of friends. Though their performances were limited to local venues and school events, the experience was formative. Neil's confidence as a performer grew, and he began to see music as more than a hobby. It was a calling. Neil's curiosity and determination often led him to explore the technical side of music. He became fascinated by the mechanics of sound, tinkering with guitars, and learning about recording techniques. This hands-on approach gave him an early understanding of production, a skill that would serve him well throughout his career. By the late 50s, Neil was fully immersed in the burgeoning music scene in Winnipeg. He attended live performances, absorbing the energy and dynamics of professional musicians. His exposure to live music reinforced his belief in the transformative power of performance, a belief that would drive his later work as both a solo artist and a band member. Neil's relationship with his father remained strained after the divorce, but Scott Young's literary career left an indelible mark on Neil. Scott's ability to craft compelling narratives inspired Neil to view songwriting as a form of storytelling. This perspective would become a hallmark of Neil's music, where vivid imagery and poignant lyrics created deeply personal and universally relatable songs. By the time Neil reached his mid-teens, his artistic vision was beginning to crystallize. He aspired to be more than a musician. He wanted to be an innovator, someone who could challenge conventions and push boundaries. This ambition set him apart from his peers and hinted at the groundbreaking career that lay ahead. By the early 60s, Neil Young's love for music had evolved from a personal passion into an ambitious pursuit. Living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Neil found himself at the epicenter of a growing local music scene that embraced the emerging sounds of rock and roll, country, and folk. During this formative period, Neil honed his skills as a guitarist, singer, and songwriter, beginning his journey toward becoming one of the most influential musicians of his time. Neil's first foray into performing came with a series of local bands, the most notable being the Jades. This teenage group played primarily at school dances and small local venues, covering rock and roll standards by Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry. Although their performances were modest, they allowed Neil to experiment with stage presence and group dynamics. Neil's reserved personality was often contrasted by his ability to captivate audiences with his raw musical talent. In the early 60s, Neil transitioned to playing with the Squires, a surf rock band he formed with local musicians. The Squires gained modest popularity in the Winnipeg area, performing regularly at community halls and clubs. Unlike the Jades, the Squires played original music alongside covers, giving Neil this first platform to showcase his burgeoning songwriting skills. Influenced by the surf music of the Ventures and the instrumental prowess of Dewey and Eddie, Neil's guitar style began to exhibit the dynamic, melodic sensibilities that would later define his sound. During his time at the Squires, Neil became increasingly serious about his music career. He developed a reputation for his work ethic and attention to detail, often spending hours rehearsing and refining arrangements. The Squires recorded a handful of instrumental tracks, which were released on a local label. Although these records didn't achieve widespread success, they marked Neil's first experience in a recording studio, exposing him to the technical aspects of music production. Neil's songwriting also began to take shape during this period. One of his earliest compositions, Sugar Mountain, written when he was just 19, became a poignant reflection on youth and the passage of time. The song's wistful lyrics and emotive melody resonated with audiences, becoming an enduring favorite in Neil's repertoire. Though the Squires primarily performed instrumental tracks, Sugar Mountain hinted at Neil's ability to create deeply personal, narrative-driven songs. Outside of the Squires, Neil found himself immersed in the vibrant folk music scene of the early 1960s. Winnipeg was home to a growing community of musicians and songwriters, and Neil quickly gravitated toward folk-inspired storytelling and acoustic sounds. He formed connections with notable artists, including Joni Mitchell, who shared his passion for introspective lyrics and melodic innovation. This exposure broadened Neil's musical horizons, encouraging him to blend the folk traditions he admired with the rock and roll energy that had inspired his youth. Neil's fascination with technology extended beyond his guitar playing. He began experimenting with amplifiers, pickups, and effects pedals, seeking ways to push the boundaries of sound. This curiosity laid the groundwork for Neil's later reputation as a pioneer of experimental and distorted guitar tones, which became hallmarks of his work with Crazy Horse and in his solo career. By 1965, Neil's ambitions had outgrown the relatively limited opportunities in Winnipeg. Inspired by the stories of burgeoning music scenes in Toronto, New York, and Los Angeles, Neil began planning a move to pursue greater opportunities. He disbanded the Squires and embarked on a solo journey, performing in coffeehouses and folk clubs across Canada. During this time, Neil developed his signature vocal style, high-pitched and emotionally resonant, which set him apart from other artists. Neil's growing reputation as a skilled songwriter and performer soon brought him to the attention of other Canadian musicians. In Toronto, he joined forces with Rick James in the short-lived band The Minor Birds. The group combined elements of rock, R&B, and funk, offering Neil a chance to explore new styles. Although the Minor Birds showed promise, they disbanded before releasing any major recordings due to legal issues surrounding Rick James. Despite this setback, Neil's experience with the Minor Birds was transformative. It introduced him to Bruce Palmer, a bassist who would later play a pivotal role in Neil's career. The disbandment also reinforced Neil's desire to forge his own path, motivating him to pursue greater creative independence. In 1966, Neil made the pivotal decision to leave Canada for Los Angeles, California. Armed with his guitar, a handful of original songs, and an unshakable determination, Neil embarked on a journey that would define the rest of his life. Driving a hearse affectionately named Mort, Neil and Bruce Palmer made their way to the heart of the American music scene. This move marked the end of Neil's early years and the beginning of his professional career. His time in Winnipeg and Toronto had provided him with the foundational skills, connections, and confidence needed to navigate the competitive landscape of the music industry. It also solidified the themes, nostalgia, resilience, and a yearning for authenticity that would permeate his songwriting for decades to come. Neil's departure from Canada was both a literal and symbolic transition. While he left behind familiar landscapes and relationships, he carried with him the experiences and influences that had shaped his identity as an artist. In Los Angeles, Neil would meet Stephen Stills, Richie Furay, and others who would become pivotal to the next chapter of his career with Buffalo Springfield. In early 1966, Neil Young took a life-altering journey, leaving Canada to pursue his musical ambitions in Los Angeles, California. Accompanied by his friend and bassist Bruce Palmer, Neil packed his belongings into a hearse he named Mort and set out for the burgeoning West Coast music scene. This move was driven by a desire to connect with like-minded musicians and immerse himself in a creative environment that could support his evolving artistic vision. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, Neil faced the initial struggles of an unknown artist in a competitive and saturated industry. He played small gigs and struggled to make ends meet, but fate intervened when he crossed paths with Stephen Stills, a talented guitarist and songwriter Neil had met briefly in Canada. Their chance meeting in Los Angeles, facilitated by mutual acquaintances, would prove transformative. Stills immediately recognized Neil's talent, and the two formed an instant musical connection. Neil, Stills, Richie Furay, Dewey Martin, and Bruce Palmer soon formed Buffalo Springfield, a group that blended folk, rock, and psychedelic influences to create a groundbreaking sound. Buffalo Springfield quickly gained attention for their tight harmonies, innovative arrangements, and ability to address contemporary issues in their music. The band's name, inspired by a brand of steamroller they saw parked on a Los Angeles street, reflected their commitment to moving forward and breaking new ground. The group's self-titled debut album, released in 1966, showcased their unique sound and cemented their place in the emerging folk rock movement. The album included tracks like Nowadays Clancy Can't Even Sing, a song penned by Neil that displayed his gift for enigmatic lyrics and emotive melodies, while Stephen Still's politically charged anthem, For What It's Worth, became the band's breakout hit. Neil's contributions to the album highlighted his ability to bring depth and introspection to their repertoire. Despite their growing success, Buffalo Springfield was plagued by internal tensions and external pressures. Neil's desire for creative control often clashed with Still's leadership style, leading to disagreements over the band's direction. Neil's introverted nature and bouts of anxiety sometimes made him withdraw from group activities, further complicating the dynamics. These challenges didn't stop Neil from creating some of his most memorable early work. On Buffalo Springfield's second album, Buffalo Springfield Again in 1967, Neil emerged as a force to be reckoned with. He wrote and performed standout tracks such as Mr. Soul, a gritty rock song that reflected his unease with fame, and Expecting to Fly, a lush orchestral ballad that showcased his experimental side. These songs revealed Neil's ability to navigate both the raw and the refined, crafting music that was deeply personal yet universally resonant. Broken Arrow, another track from Buffalo Springfield Again, epitomized Neil's penchant for pushing boundaries. The song's unconventional structure and use of studio effects demonstrated his willingness to experiment with form and production. It was clear that Neil was not content to simply follow trends. He sought to redefine them, even if it meant challenging his bandmates and alienating some listeners. Buffalo Springfield's rise to fame coincided with a period of social and political upheaval in the United States. The Vietnam War, civil rights struggles, and the countercultural movement all influenced the band's music. While Stephen Stills often took the lead in addressing these issues directly, as in For What It's Worth, Neil's contributions tended to be more introspective, exploring the emotional and psychological toll of living in turbulent times. Despite their creative achievements, Buffalo Springfield was a band in turmoil. Bruce Palmer's frequent legal troubles and deportations disrupted their schedule, and the constant friction between Neil and Stills made collaboration increasingly difficult. By 1968, the band was on the brink of collapse. Their final album, Last Time Around, was released posthumously after the group had officially disbanded. Neil contributed several tracks, including I Am a Child, a tender and introspective piece that reflected his growing maturity as a songwriter. Buffalo Springfield's dissolution marked the end of a brief but impactful chapter in Neil Young's career. The band had only existed for about 2 years, yet their influence on folk rock and country rock was immense. They paved the way for artists who sought to blend traditional and contemporary sounds, and their experimentation with production techniques foreshadowed many of Neil's later innovations. For Neil, the breakup of Buffalo Springfield was both a disappointment and an opportunity. While the band's potential had been cut short, Neil's experiences with the group had solidified his reputation as a formidable songwriter and musician. He had proven his ability to create compelling music in a collaborative setting, even as he yearned for the freedom to pursue his artistic vision without compromise. In the aftermath of Buffalo Springfield's breakup, Neil wasted no time in moving forward. He signed a solo deal with Reprise Records and began working on his self-titled debut album. It was during this period that Neil began to establish himself as a singular voice in the music industry, one whose work would continually evolve and defy expectations. Neil's time at Buffalo Springfield laid the foundation for the rest of his career. It introduced him to a larger audience, allowed him to develop his skills as a songwriter and producer, and gave him the confidence to push creative boundaries. The band's legacy, while short-lived, remains a testament to the power of collaboration and the importance of taking risks in the pursuit of artistic growth. With the dissolution of Buffalo Springfield in 1968, Neil Young stood at a crossroads. Determined to forge his own path, he embarked on a solo career that would soon define his place as one of the most innovative and uncompromising artists of his generation. Neil's early solo efforts not only showcased his unique voice and songwriting, but also introduced the world to the raw energy of Crazy Horse, a band that would become synonymous with his electric, experimental sound. Neil's self-titled debut album, released in November 1968 on Reprise Records, marked the beginning of his solo journey. Recorded in Los Angeles, the album featured a blend of introspective folk ballads and lushly arranged orchestral pieces reflecting Neil's desire to explore new sonic territories. Tracks like The Loner and I've Been Waiting for You highlighted Neil's ability to balance melancholy with urgency, creating a distinct musical identity that was both tender and defiant. Although the album received mixed reviews upon release, it established Neil as a serious artist with a vision. Critics noted the uniqueness of his voice, high-pitched, fragile, and deeply emotive, as well as his willingness to experiment with arrangements. Neil himself was not entirely satisfied with the production, which he later described as overly polished, but the album provided a strong foundation for his evolving sound. While working on his second album, Neil crossed paths with the Rockets, a local band known for their raw and unrefined energy. Intrigued by their dynamic sound, Neil invited three members of the group, Danny Whitten in guitar, Billy Talbot in bass, and Ralph Molina, drums, to collaborate on his new material. Renaming the band Crazy Horse, Neil found a musical partner that complemented his vision perfectly. Crazy Horse's loose, improvisational style added grit and spontaneity to Neil's songs, creating a chemistry that would define some of his most iconic work. In May 1969, Neil released his second solo album, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, with Crazy Horse as his backing band. The album marked a significant shift in Neil's music, blending raw rock energy with introspective lyricism. It included some of his most enduring classics, such as Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River, and Cowgirl in the Sand. These songs exemplified Neil's ability to juxtapose simplicity and complexity. While the lyrics often reflected personal themes of longing, love, and existential uncertainty, the extended instrumental jams showcase his willingness to break from conventional song structures. The interplay between Neil's piercing guitar solos and Crazy Horse's driving rhythms created a sound that was both visceral and transcendent. Cinnamon Girl, with its infectious riff and straightforward lyrics, became an instant hit and remains one of Neil's most beloved tracks. Meanwhile, Down by the River and Cowgirl in the Sand demonstrated Neil's penchant for crafting epic, emotionally charged narratives that unfolded over extended musical landscapes. These tracks highlighted Neil's unique approach to songwriting, melding storytelling with improvisation and raw emotion. Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere was a commercial and critical success, cementing Neil's reputation as a solo artist. The album's impact on the emerging genre of country rock was profound, influencing countless musicians and setting the stage for Neil's future explorations of Americana themes. The success of Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere led to a series of tours that showcased the explosive live chemistry between Neil and Crazy Horse. Their performances were marked by extended jams, unpredictable shifts in tempo, and a palpable sense of camaraderie. Neil often described Crazy Horse as an extension of himself, a band that could intuitively translate his emotions into music. However, the relationship between Neil and Crazy Horse was not without its challenges. Danny Whitten, the band's guitarist and a close friend of Neil's, struggled with substance abuse, which began to affect his performance and reliability. This tension would come to a head in later years, but during this period, Crazy Horse's creative synergy remained intact, driving Neil's music to new heights. During this time, Neil also began to assert himself as a producer, taking a hands-on approach to the recording process. His willingness to embrace imperfections, leaving in mistakes or moments of spontaneity, became a defining characteristic of his music. Neil's production style emphasized authenticity over polish, a philosophy that resonated with audiences and set him apart from many of his contemporaries. The years 1968 to 1970 were a transformative period for Neil Young. In just a short span, he had transitioned from a member of Buffalo Springfield to a fully realized solo artist, carving out a unique space in the music world. His collaboration with Crazy Horse not only redefined his sound, but also established a template for the balance between raw energy and lyrical introspection that would characterize much of his later work. This era also marked Neil's emergence as a pioneer of the album format, viewing his records not merely as collections of songs, but as cohesive artistic statements. The success of Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere provided Neil with the confidence to continue exploring his creative instincts, even if it meant defying industry expectations. As the 1970s began, Neil was poised to take his career to even greater heights. His next endeavors would see him collaborating with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, releasing landmark solo albums, and solidifying his reputation as one of the most versatile and uncompromising artists of his time. In 1969, Neil Young's career took another transformative turn when he joined forces with David Crosby, Stephen Stills, and Graham Nash to form the iconic supergroup Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Initially a trio, Crosby, Stills, and Nash had already garnered significant acclaim for their intricate harmonies and folk rock sound. Neil's addition brought a new dimension to the group, infusing their music with his distinctive style, fiery guitar work, and emotionally resonant songwriting. The idea to bring Neil into the fold originated with Stephen Stills, Neil's former bandmate from Buffalo Springfield. Stills recognized that Neil's musical prowess and creative unpredictability could elevate the group's sound to new heights. Though there were initial reservations, particularly from Graham Nash, who worried about Neil's strong-willed personality, the decision to include Neil ultimately proved to be a masterstroke. Neil's entrance into CSNY transformed the trio into a quartet with unparalleled potential. Each member brought a unique strength to the group. Crosby's ethereal harmonies, Stills' technical skill, Nash's melodic sensibilities, and Neil's raw intensity. Together, they created a dynamic balance that allowed them to explore a wide range of styles and themes. CSNY's first project as a quartet was the album Deja Vu, released in 1970. The record became an instant classic, blending folk, rock, and country influences with introspective lyrics and lush vocal arrangements. Each member contributed standout tracks, showcasing their individual talents while maintaining a cohesive group identity. Neil's contributions to Deja Vu included the haunting ballad Helpless and the country-tinged Country Girl Suite. Helpless became one of Neil's most enduring songs, capturing a sense of vulnerability and longing with its plaintive melody and evocative lyrics. The track's sparse instrumentation allowed Neil's voice to take center stage, creating a deeply emotional listening experience. Country Girl, on the other hand, demonstrated Neil's penchant for ambitious, multi-part compositions. The song's intricate structure and shifting moods highlighted his ability to merge narrative depth with musical experimentation. Both tracks underscored Neil's role as a creative force within the group, pushing CSNY to explore uncharted musical territory. Deja Vu was a commercial and critical triumph, reaching #1 on the Billboard charts and cementing CSNY's status as one of the era's defining bands. The album's success was bolstered by hit singles like Teach Your Children and Woodstock, as well as the group's reputation for breathtaking harmonies and socially conscious lyrics. In May 1970, the Kent State shootings set shockwaves through the United States. 4 unarmed college students were killed by the Ohio National Guard during a protest against the Vietnam War, sparking outrage and grief across the nation. Neil Young, deeply affected by the incident, wrote the protest anthem Ohio in response. Recorded with CSNY, Ohio became an instant rallying cry for the anti-war movement. The song's raw energy and urgent lyrics captured the collective anger and sorrow of a generation. Lines like Tin Soldiers and Nixon Coming laid bare Neil's disdain for the political establishment, while the haunting refrain, How Many More, echoed the unrelenting toll of violence. Ohio was released as a single just weeks after the tragedy, demonstrating the group's ability to respond to current events with both artistry and immediacy. The song's impact was profound, solidifying CSNY's reputation as a band willing to take a stand on social and political issues. While CSNY's music was groundbreaking, their collaboration was fraught with tension. Each member had a strong personality and distinct creative vision, leading to frequent clashes over songwriting, arrangements, and decision-making. Neil, in particular, valued his independence and often resisted group dynamics that he felt stifled his individuality. Despite these challenges, the group's synergy on stage was undeniable. Their live performances, characterized by intricate harmonies and fiery instrumental interplay, drew massive audiences and solidified their status as cultural icons. CSNY's legendary set at Woodstock in 1969 remains a defining moment of their career, showcasing their ability to connect with the countercultural spirit of the time. Even as a member of CSNY, Neil continued to pursue his solo career, releasing the critically acclaimed album After the Gold Rush in 1970. This dual focus sometimes created friction within the group as Neil's solo success reinforced his preference for creative autonomy. Nevertheless, his contributions to CSNY added depth and complexity to their music, enriching the group's legacy. Though Neil's tenure with CSNY was relatively brief, his impact on the group was profound. His songwriting, musicianship, and willingness to push boundaries helped elevate CSNY from a talented trio to a transformative force in popular music. The group's blend of personal introspection and political commentary resonated deeply with audiences, making them a defining voice of their generation. CSNY's influence extended beyond their music, shaping the cultural and political discourse of the era. Songs like Ohio and Helpless became anthems for a restless and idealistic youth, while Deja Vu set a high standard for artistic collaboration. For Neil, his time with CSNY was a crucial chapter in his career, providing him with both the platform and the confidence to continue exploring new creative horizons. As the group began to splinter in 1971, Neil turned his focus back to his solo career. The tensions that had fueled CSNY's brilliance also made sustained collaboration difficult. However, the music they created during this period remains a testament to the power of artistic unity in the face of individual differences. The early 1970s marked a period of artistic and commercial triumph for Neil Young. As he stepped away from Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, Neil concentrated on his solo work, producing 2 of the most celebrated albums of his career, After the Gold Rush in 1970 and Harvest in 1972. These records not only solidified Neil's status as a leading figure in the singer-songwriter movement, but also showcased his ability to blend deeply personal storytelling with innovative musical arrangements. Neil's third solo album, After the Gold Rush, was inspired by an unproduced screenplay co-written by actor Dean Stockwell and Herb Berman. Although the film project was abandoned, Neil used its themes as a springboard for an album that explored environmental concerns, societal decay, and introspection. Recorded primarily in Neil's home studio in Topanga Canyon, the album had an intimate and raw quality that resonated with listeners. After the Gold Rush featured a mix of acoustic ballads, rock-driven tracks, and piano-centered pieces, reflecting Neil's eclectic approach to songwriting. Songs like Tell Me Why and Don't Let It Bring You Down demonstrated his knack for crafting poignant, introspective lyrics, while tracks such as Southern Man addressed broader social issues, including racism in the American South. Southern Man became one of the album's most talked-about tracks, highlighting Neil's willingness to tackle controversial topics. The song's fiery critique of racism inspired widespread discussion and even elicited a response from Lynyrd Skynyrd in their hit Sweet Home Alabama. This exchange would later be viewed as a friendly dialogue between artists, illustrating Neil's ability to spark conversation through his music. The title track, After the Gold Rush, epitomized Neil's gift for evocative imagery and emotional depth. With its minimalist arrangement of piano and French horn, the song painted a surreal yet poignant picture of environmental devastation and existential longing. Its haunting refrain, "Look at Mother Nature on the Run" in the 1970s, captured the anxieties of a generation grappling with ecological and social upheaval. Despite its unconventional production and varied styles, After the Gold Rush was a critical and commercial success, reaching the top 10 on the Billboard 200. It remains one of Neil's most enduring works, celebrated for its lyrical depth and emotional resonance. Building on the success of After the Gold Rush, Neil released Harvest in 1972, an album that would become his most commercially successful and widely recognized work. Recorded in Nashville with the Stray Gators, a group of seasoned session musicians, Harvest combined folk, country, and rock influences to create a warm, accessible sound. The album's standout track, Heart of Gold, became Neil's first and only #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. With its gentle acoustic guitar, harmonica, and introspective lyrics, Heart of Gold epitomized Neil's ability to connect with listeners on a deeply personal level. The song's universal appeal introduced Neil to a broader audience, cementing his place as one of the era's most influential artists. Other notable tracks on Harvest included Old Man, a touching reflection on aging and relationships, and The Needle and the Damage Done, a stark and unflinching portrayal of addiction. The latter song was inspired by Neil's observations of friends and colleagues struggling with heroin abuse, including Crazy Horse guitarist Danny Whitten. Its raw honesty and brevity made it one of Neil's most impactful songs. One of the album's more experimental moments came in the form of A Man Needs a Maid, which featured orchestral arrangements by Jack Mitzsche. The song's lyrics, often interpreted as a meditation on loneliness and vulnerability, sparked controversy for their perceived gendered language. However, Neil explained that the song was a reflection of his own struggles with fame and relationships, rather than a commentary on women. Harvest also included Alabama, a song that echoed the themes of Southern Man and critiqued the lingering racism in the American South. Together, these tracks solidified Neil's reputation as a socially conscious artist unafraid to address uncomfortable truths. The success of Harvest brought Neil unprecedented fame, but it also left him feeling uneasy. He often expressed discomfort with the trappings of celebrity and the pressure to replicate his success. This tension would influence his subsequent work as Neil deliberately moved away from the polished sound of Harvest in favor of darker and more experimental directions. During this time, Neil's personal life also experienced significant changes. He began a relationship with actress Carrie Snodgrass, who inspired several songs on Harvest, including A Man Needs a Maid. The couple had a son, Zeke, who was born with cerebral palsy. This experience deeply affected Neil, fueling his empathy and commitment to advocacy for individuals with disabilities. After the Gold Rush and Harvest marked a period of creative and commercial peak for Neil Young. These albums not only defined his sound, but also established him as one of the most important voices of his generation. Their themes of introspection, social commentary, and experimentation set a standard for singer-songwriters and influenced countless artists across genres. While Harvest brought Neil his greatest commercial success, it also represented a turning point. The pressures of fame and the complexities of his personal life led him to seek new artistic directions, resulting in the darker and more challenging work that would define the next phase of his career. Following the massive success of Harvest in 1972, Neil Young found himself at a critical juncture in his career. While the album catapulted him to mainstream fame, Neil became increasingly uncomfortable with the expectations and pressures that accompanied commercial success. Rather than attempting to replicate the polished and accessible sound of Harvest, Neil deliberately veered into darker and more experimental territory. The result was a series of albums that later became known as the Ditch Trilogy, Time Fades Away, On the Beach, and Tonight's the Night. These records were raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal, reflecting Neil's disillusionment with fame and his struggles with personal loss. The first album in the trilogy, Time Fades Away, was recorded live during Neil's 1973 tour. Unlike typical live albums, which often showcase polished performances, Time Fades Away captured the raw, unvarnished energy of the concerts. Neil described the album as the worst record I ever made, not because of its quality, but because of the turmoil surrounding its creation. The tour was fraught with tension, exacerbated by Neil's strained vocal cords and the chaotic dynamics of his backing band. The songs on Time Fades Away were entirely new, with no studio versions recorded beforehand. Tracks like Don't Be Denied and the title song offered a candid glimpse into Neil's state of mind, grappling with his disconnection from the music industry and the isolation brought on by fame. The album's rawness and spontaneity divided critics and fans at the time but have since earned it a cult following. Neil's personal life during this period was marked by profound loss. In 1972, Danny Whitten, the guitarist of Crazy Horse, died of a heroin overdose. Not long after, Bruce Berry, a roadie and close friend, also succumbed to drug addiction. These tragedies weighed heavily on Neil, prompting him to channel his grief into Tonight's the Night, the third album in the trilogy. Recorded over several sessions in 1973, Tonight's the Night was a harrowing and unflinching meditation on loss, addiction, and mortality. The album's lo-fi production and emotionally raw performances created an atmosphere of catharsis. Tracks like Tired Eyes and the title song directly addressed the impact of drug abuse, while songs like Borrowed Tomb showcased Neil's vulnerability and introspection. When Tonight's the Night was finally released in 1975, it confounded many listeners with its unpolished sound and bleak themes. However, it has since been hailed as one of Neil's most honest and impactful works, influencing generations of artists in the alternative and grunge scenes. The middle album in the trilogy, On the Beach, struck a balance between the despair of Tonight's the Night and the spontaneity of Time Fades Away. Released in 1974, On the Beach was a deeply introspective record, exploring themes of alienation, paranoia, and the fragility of human connections. Tracks like Ambulance Blues and Revolution Blues were both haunting and thought-provoking, reflecting Neil's growing disenchantment with the world around him. Ambulance Blues, in particular, stood out for its poetic lyrics and intricate arrangement, blending acoustic instruments with an underlying sense of unease. The song's enigmatic nature invited multiple interpretations, solidifying Neil's reputation as a masterful storyteller. Meanwhile, For the Turnstiles and the title track offered glimpses of hope amid the darkness, creating a nuanced and multifaceted listening experience. Though not an immediate commercial success, On the Beach became a critical favorite over time, often cited as one of Neil's best works. Its haunting melodies and existential themes resonated with audiences who appreciated its depth and honesty. The Ditch trilogy represented Neil's refusal to conform to industry expectations. While the albums were commercially risky, they showcased his commitment to authenticity and artistic integrity. This period also saw Neil experimenting with different musical styles and recording techniques, further solidifying his reputation as an innovator. In addition to the trilogy, Neil explored other projects during this time. He recorded an album called Homegrown in 1974, which was initially shelved in favor of Tonight's the Night. Homegrown remained unreleased for decades, but eventually saw the light of day in 2020, offering fans a glimpse into Neil's creative process during this transformative era. By the late 1970s, Neil had begun to re-engage with more accessible sounds, signaling the end of his experimental Ditch trilogy phase. Albums like Zuma and Comes a Time showcased a return to melodic songwriting and reflected a more optimistic outlook. However, the raw emotion and innovative spirit of the trilogy left an indelible mark on Neil's career, influencing his future work and cementing his legacy as one of rock's most uncompromising artists. The Ditch trilogy remains one of the most compelling chapters in Neil Young's career. These albums were born out of personal pain and professional frustration, yet they stand as a testament to Neil's willingness to take risks and embrace vulnerability. They also demonstrated his ability to connect with listeners on a deeply emotional level, even when addressing difficult or uncomfortable subjects. This period solidified Neil's reputation as a pioneer of alternative music, paving the way for artists who sought to challenge conventions and prioritize artistic expression over commercial success. The trilogy's influence can be felt in genres ranging from indie rock to grunge, underscoring Neil's enduring impact on the music world. By the late 1970s, Neil Young had emerged from the experimental haze of the Ditch trilogy, with a renewed sense of purpose. While his work during the early part of the decade had solidified his reputation as an uncompromising artist, the latter half of the 1970s saw Neil re-engaging with more melodic and accessible sounds. This shift culminated in the release of Russ Never Sleeps, 1979, an album that reinvigorated his career and reaffirmed his relevance in an ever-changing music landscape. Released in 1979, Russ Never Sleeps was a bold statement that juxtaposed acoustic and electric sounds. The album featured two distinct sides. The first half emphasized introspective, folk-inspired songs, while the second half unleashed the raw power of Neil's electric guitar. This duality underscored Neil's versatility as an artist and his ability to seamlessly transition between musical styles. The album's opening track, My, Hey Hey, Out of the Blue, introduced a theme that echoed throughout the record: the cyclical nature of creativity and the inevitability of change. Its electric counterpart, Hey Hey, My, Into the Black, became an anthem for the punk and grunge movements with its unforgettable line, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." Another standout track, Powderfinger, told a haunting story of violence and loss, showcasing Neil's storytelling prowess and his ability to evoke vivid imagery through his lyrics. The song's layered guitar work and emotional intensity highlighted the unique synergy between Neil and Crazy Horse, who played an integral role in the album's creation. Russ Never Sleeps was both a critical and commercial success, receiving widespread acclaim for its innovation and energy. The album's live performances, captured on the accompanying live Rust album and film, further solidified Neil's reputation as one of the most dynamic and unpredictable live performers of his time. The success of Russ Never Sleeps marked the beginning of a decade in which Neil continued to explore a wide array of musical styles. While his willingness to experiment earned him praise for his boldness, it also led to some of the most divisive moments in his career. In 1982, Neil released Trans, an album that shocked fans and critics alike with its heavy use of synthesizers and vocoders. Inspired by his efforts to communicate with his son Ben, who was born with severe cerebral palsy, Trans reflected Neil's deep personal struggles and his fascination with technology. Though it received mixed reviews, the album demonstrated Neil's commitment to pushing creative boundaries, even at the risk of alienating his audience. Neil's exploration of different genres continued with Everybody's Rockin', a rockabilly album recorded with the Shocking Pinks. This lighthearted and nostalgic project was a stark departure from his usual style and was released in response to tensions with his record label, Geffen Records. The album's short runtime and playful tone confused many fans, but it further exemplified Neil's refusal to conform to expectations. By the late 1980s, Neil began to refocus on politically charged and socially conscious music. His 1989 album, Freedom, marked a return to form, blending the experimental spirit of his earlier work with the accessibility of his commercial hits. The album's centerpiece, Rockin' in the Free World, became an instant anthem addressing themes of inequality, consumerism, and political apathy. Rockin' in the Free World resonated deeply with listeners, capturing the frustrations of a generation grappling with societal challenges. Its powerful riff and anthemic chorus cemented it as one of Neil's most iconic songs, earning widespread acclaim and reinvigorating his career. During this period, Neil also began to embrace his role as a bridge between generations. His collaborations with younger artists, including performances with bands like Sonic Youth and his support for emerging grunge acts, showcase his ability to adapt to and influence new musical movements. Neil's willingness to collaborate and experiment ensured his continued relevance in a rapidly evolving industry. The 1980s were a decade of reinvention and resilience for Neil Young. While his experiments with genre and production occasionally divided critics and fans, they demonstrated his unyielding commitment to artistic exploration. Albums like Russ Never Sleeps and Freedom reaffirmed his status as a creative visionary, while his forays into electronic music and rockabilly underscored his versatility. Neil's impact during this period extended beyond music. His advocacy for social and environmental causes, including co-founding Farm Aid in 1985, further cemented his legacy as an artist who used his platform to address pressing global issues. As the 1990s approached, Neil Young's career was once again on an upward trajectory. With a newfound sense of purpose and an enduring influence on both his contemporaries and emerging artists, Neil entered the next decade poised to continue shaping the musical landscape. Neil Young's career has always been about more than just music. Throughout his life, Neil has used his platform to advocate for social, environmental, and humanitarian causes, demonstrating a commitment to making the world a better place. Among his many efforts, Neil's involvement with Farm Aid stands out as a cornerstone of his activism, showcasing his dedication to supporting struggling family farmers and raising awareness about agricultural sustainability. In 1985, Neil Young, alongside Willie Nelson and John Mellencamp, co-founded Farm Aid, an annual benefit concert to support American family farmers. The inspiration for Farm Aid came from the devastating agricultural crisis of the 1980s, during which many small farmers were losing their land due to financial hardships. Motivated by a desire to help, Neil and his fellow musicians organized the first Farm Aid concert, which took place on September 22, 1985 in Champaign, Illinois. The inaugural event was a massive success, featuring performances by a star-studded lineup that included Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash, and Tom Petty. The concert raised over $9 million, which was used to provide financial assistance to farmers, fund advocacy programs, and promote sustainable farming practices. For Neil, Farm Aid became more than just an annual event, it was a personal mission. He frequently spoke about the importance of family farms not only for their economic contributions but also for their role in preserving rural communities and traditional ways of life. Neil's speeches at Farm Aid events often highlighted the challenges faced by small farmers, including corporate consolidation, unfair trade policies, and the environmental impact of industrial agriculture. Neil's activism extended beyond Farm Aid to encompass a wide range of environmental causes. A staunch advocate for renewable energy, Neil became increasingly vocal about the dangers of fossil fuels and climate change. In the 2000s, he spearheaded the Linkvolt project, converting a 1959 Lincoln Continental into an electric car powered by renewable energy. This ambitious project reflected Neil's belief in the power of innovation to combat environmental challenges. Neil's commitment to environmental advocacy also influenced his music. Albums like Greendale explored themes of environmental degradation and corporate greed, while his live performances often included calls to action for sustainability. Songs like Mother Earth became rallying cries for conservation efforts, emphasizing the interconnectedness of humanity and the natural world. Another important facet of Neil's activism has been his support for Indigenous rights. He has consistently used his platform to amplify the voices of Indigenous communities, particularly in their battles against resource extraction projects that threaten their lands and livelihoods. Neil's 2014 Honor the Treaties tour raised awareness about the environmental and cultural impacts of oil sands development in Canada, with proceeds supporting Indigenous legal challenges against these projects. Neil's advocacy in this area was deeply personal, as he often spoke about the need to protect the earth for future generations. His commitment to justice for Indigenous peoples further cemented his reputation as an artist who not only spoke about issues, but actively worked to address them. Neil's passion for sustainable agriculture extended to his personal life. A strong supporter of organic food, Neil frequently emphasized the importance of sustainable farming practices and the dangers of genetically modified organisms. His 2015 album, The Monsanto Years, was a scathing critique of agribusiness giant Monsanto and its role in promoting GMO crops and pesticides. The album's politically charged lyrics reflected Neil's frustration with corporate control over food systems and his unwavering support for small farmers. In interviews and public appearances, Neil often highlighted the connections between food production, environmental health, and human well-being. He advocated for policies that supported local food systems, reduced reliance on harmful chemicals, and promoted biodiversity. Since its inception, Farm Aid has become a cornerstone of Neil's activism. The annual concerts continue to raise millions of dollars for family farmers, funding grants, educational programs, and advocacy campaigns. Farm Aid's mission has evolved over the years to address emerging challenges, such as climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic, while staying true to its core mission of supporting family farms. Neil's involvement in Farm Aid extends beyond his performances. As a board member, he actively participates in shaping the organization's strategy and ensuring that its initiatives align with its mission. His passion and dedication have inspired countless other artists to lend their voices to the cause, creating a community of musicians and advocates united in their commitment to sustainable agriculture. Neil's activism has always been intertwined with his music, creating a body of work that reflects his values and beliefs. Whether writing protest songs, funding innovative projects, or speaking out at public events, Neil has consistently used his influence to advocate for change. His willingness to challenge powerful corporations, address systemic injustices, and inspire grassroots movements has made him a respected figure not only in music, but also in the broader social and environmental justice communities. Neil Young's activism is a testament to his belief that art and advocacy go hand in hand. Through Farm Aid, environmental campaigns, and his support for Indigenous rights, Neil has demonstrated a lifelong commitment to using his platform for good. His efforts have not only raised awareness about critical issues, but also provided tangible support to those in need, leaving a lasting legacy of compassion, resilience, and determination. As Neil continues to perform and create, his activism remains a central part of his identity. His unwavering dedication to justice and sustainability serves as a reminder that music can be a powerful force for change, inspiring generations to take action and build a better future. The 1990s marked a period of reinvention and exploration for Neil Young. As technology began to transform the music industry, Neil adapted by embracing both digital innovations and collaborations with younger artists. This era not only reinforced Neil's relevance in the rapidly evolving music scene, but also showcased his ability to remain true to his artistic vision while engaging with new generations of musicians and listeners. In the early 1990s, Neil Young was hailed as the godfather of grunge due to his profound influence on the emerging genre. His raw, distorted guitar work, unpolished production style, and emotionally charged lyrics resonated deeply with grunge bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden. Neil's connection to these artists was more than stylistic. He shared their ethos of authenticity and rejection of mainstream conformity. Neil's 1990 album, Ragged Glory, recorded with Crazy Horse, epitomized his grunge-adjacent sound. The album featured extended jams, raucous energy, and a return to the loud, electric guitar-driven style that had characterized much of his earlier work. Tracks like Love and Only Love and Fuckin' Up showcased Neil's ability to channel raw emotion into powerful, cathartic music. Neil's collaborations with Pearl Jam further solidified his place in the grunge movement. Their joint 1995 album, Mirror Ball, was a fusion of Neil's introspective songwriting and Pearl Jam's high-energy rock. The project highlighted Neil's willingness to experiment and connect with younger artists, bridging the gap between the 1960s counterculture and the alternative rock scene of the 1990s. As the digital age began to reshape the music industry, Neil Young took a critical stance on the impact of new technologies. While he embraced some aspects of digital recording, he was outspoken about the decline in audio quality associated with compressed formats like MP3s. Neil believed that digital compression diminished the emotional resonance of music, leading him to advocate for higher fidelity audio standards. In the late 1990s, Neil began working on what would later become the Pono Project, a high-resolution audio player and music service designed to preserve the full depth and richness of recorded sound. Although the Pono player wouldn't launch until the 2010s, Neil's efforts during this period reflected his lifelong commitment to sound quality and his willingness to challenge industry norms. In 1992, Neil released Harvest Moon, a reflective and acoustic-driven album that served as a spiritual sequel to his 1972 masterpiece, Harvest. The album's gentle melodies, introspective lyrics, and lush arrangements resonated deeply with fans, earning widespread critical acclaim and commercial success. Tracks like Harvest Moon and Unknown Legend capture a sense of nostalgia and romanticism, reflecting Neil's ability to convey universal emotions through simple yet evocative storytelling. The album also featured contributions from many of the same musicians who had played on Harvest, creating a sense of continuity and revisiting the pastoral themes that had endeared Neil to listeners 2 decades earlier. Harvest Moon became one of Neil's most beloved albums, earning multiple awards and reaffirming his ability to create timeless music that resonated across generations. The 1990s also saw Neil branching out into film soundtracks and experimental projects. In 1995, he composed the score for Jim Jarmusch's film Dead Man, a haunting western that featured Neil's improvised guitar work. The soundtrack's stark and atmospheric quality underscored Neil's versatility as a musician, demonstrating his ability to adapt his sound to different mediums. Neil continued to experiment with unconventional recording techniques during this period. Albums like Sleeps with Angels delved into darker and more introspective territory, addressing themes of loss and mortality. The album's title track was inspired by the death of Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain, whose suicide note famously quoted Neil's lyric, "It's better to burn out than to fade away." The connection between Neil and Cobain highlighted the profound influence Neil had on the grunge generation. Throughout the 1990s, Neil used his music to address pressing social and political issues. His 1996 album Broken Arrow featured songs that reflected his concerns about corporate greed, environmental degradation, and the loss of individuality in a rapidly globalizing world. Neil's willingness to tackle challenging topics reinforced his reputation as an artist unafraid to speak truth to power. In addition to his solo work, Neil remained committed to farm aid, performing at the annual benefit concerts and advocating for sustainable agriculture. His activism during this period extended to other causes, including indigenous rights and renewable energy, further solidifying his legacy as an artist activist. Neil's collaborations with younger artists and his willingness to engage with new musical styles ensured his continued relevance in the 1990s. His appearances at festivals like Bridge School Benefit, which he co-founded with his wife Peggy, brought together artists from different genres and generations, fostering a sense of community and mutual respect. Through his innovative projects, thoughtful collaborations, and unwavering dedication to his craft, Neil Young remained a vital force in the music world during the 1990s. His ability to adapt to changing times while staying true to his artistic vision ensured that his influence would endure well into the digital age. As Neil Young entered the 21st century, his career showed no signs of slowing down. Far from resting on his laurels, Neil embraced new challenges, explored diverse musical styles, and undertook ambitious archival projects that preserve and celebrated his extensive body of work. Through his efforts, Neil solidified his legacy as one of music's most prolific and influential figures, while continuing to inspire both fans and fellow musicians. The 2000s saw Neil releasing albums that reflected his concern for global issues and his enduring commitment to activism. In 2006, he released Living with War, a politically charged record that directly addressed the era at war and criticized the policies of the Bush administration. Tracks like Let's Impeach the President and Flags of Freedom captured Neil's frustration with the direction of the United States, while the album's raw, stripped-down production emphasized its urgency and sincerity. Neil's ability to channel his political convictions into compelling music reaffirmed his role as a socially conscious artist. Living with War resonated with listeners who shared his concerns, serving as a rallying cry for those advocating for peace and accountability. Neil continued to experiment with traditional American music during the 2010s. His 2012 album Americana, recorded with Crazy Horse, reimagined classic folk songs such as Oh Susanna and This Land Is Your Land through the lens of Neil's electric, gritty style. The album bridged the gap between past and present, paying homage to America's musical heritage while infusing it with modern energy. This period also saw Neil returning to acoustic and introspective songwriting with albums like Peace Trail and Colorado. These records showcased Neil's ability to balance personal reflection with broader commentary on environmental and social issues. One of Neil's most ambitious undertakings in the 21st century has been the Neil Young Archives, a comprehensive initiative to preserve and share his extensive catalog of recordings, performances, and memorabilia. Launched in 2017 as an interactive online platform, the Archives offered fans unprecedented access to Neil's music, including rare tracks, unreleased material, and live recordings. The project reflected Neil's dedication to maintaining the integrity of his work and ensuring that future generations could experience his music in its full context. The Archives also highlighted Neil's innovative spirit, using cutting-edge technology to create an immersive and accessible experience for fans. Neil's advocacy for environmental sustainability remained a central theme of his work during this period. In addition to raising awareness through his music, Neil continued to champion renewable energy and conservation efforts. His 2015 album, The Monsanto Years, was a scathing critique of corporate control over agriculture and the environmental damage caused by large agribusinesses. Neil's commitment to sound quality also took center stage with the launch of the Pono Project in 2014. Designed to deliver high-resolution audio, the Pono Player and its accompanying music service sought to restore the depth and richness of recorded sound that Neil believed was lost in the digital age. While the project faced challenges and ultimately ceased operations, it underscored Neil's dedication to preserving the artistry of music. Neil's collaborative spirit continued to shine through his live performances and recording projects. He frequently worked with Crazy Horse, producing albums that captured the raw, electric energy of the early days. At the same time, Neil collaborated with contemporary artists, including Willie Nelson's sons Lucas and Micah Nelson, who performed with him as part of the backing band Promise of the Real. Neil's live performances during this period remained as dynamic and unpredictable as ever. Whether performing solo acoustic sets or electrified shows with Crazy Horse, Neil brought a sense of immediacy and authenticity to every stage he graced. His appearances at festivals like Farm Aid and Bridge School Benefit further highlighted his enduring commitment to using music as a force for good. As Neil approached his 8th decade, his influence on music and culture remained profound. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, once as a solo artist and again as a member of Buffalo Springfield, reflecting the breadth of his contributions to the industry. His willingness to take risks, challenge conventions, and remain true to his artistic vision inspired countless musicians across generations. Neil's music continued to resonate with listeners of all ages, offering a sense of connection and solace in an increasingly complex world. His ability to address both personal and universal themes ensured that his work remained relevant even as the industry and cultural landscape evolved. Neil Young's journey is a testament to the power of creativity, resilience, and authenticity. From his early days in Winnipeg to his status as a global icon, Neil has remained steadfast in his commitment to his craft and his causes. As he continues to release new music, perform live, and advocate for social and environmental justice, Neil's legacy grows richer with each passing year. Through his music, activism, and archival efforts, Neil Young has created a body of work that will endure for generations to come. His story is one of evolution and innovation, a reminder that true artistry knows no bounds. Neil Young's impact on music and pop culture is immeasurable. Over a career spanning more than 6 decades, Neil has not only shaped the sound of rock, folk, and country music, but has also become a symbol of artistic integrity and social consciousness. His influence can be seen in the work of countless musicians, the evolution of musical genres, and his enduring presence in popular culture. Neil's work with Crazy Horse introduced a raw electric sound that bridged the gap between rock and garage punk, influencing genres as diverse as grunge and alternative rock. Songs like Cinnamon Girl and Cowgirl in the Sand became anthems of the 1970s, celebrated for their visceral energy and innovative guitar work. In the 1990s, Neil's influence on the grunge movement earned him the nickname the Godfather of Grunge. Bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden cited Neil as a major inspiration, drawing from his unfiltered approach to songwriting and his embrace of distortion and feedback. Neil's collaboration with Pearl Jam on the album Mirror Ball underscored his role as a mentor and bridge between generations of musicians. Kurt Cobain famously quoted Neil in his suicide note, writing, "It's better to burn out than to fade away," a lyric from Neil's song Hey Hey My, Into the Black. While this tragic connection added a somber layer to Neil's legacy, it also highlighted the deep emotional resonance of his music within the grunge community. Neil's music has always been intertwined with his activism, making him a prominent figure in social and political movements. Songs like Ohio and Rockin' in the Free World became rallying cries for justice and change, addressing issues ranging from war to environmental degradation. Neil's ability to blend art and advocacy inspired countless artists to use their platforms for good. Neil Young's influence extends beyond music into broader cultural realms. His songs have been featured in countless films, television shows, and commercials, reflecting their timeless appeal. Tracks like Heart of Gold and Old Man have become cultural touchstones, evoking nostalgia and introspection in listeners across generations. Numerous artists have paid tribute to Neil, covering his songs and citing him as a pivotal influence. From Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen to modern acts like Bon Iver and Wilco, Neil's impact is evident in the work of musicians spanning decades and genres. One of Neil's most enduring legacies is his refusal to be confined by genre. Throughout his career, he has seamlessly transitioned between folk, rock, country, electronic, and even experimental styles, proving that true artistry knows no limits. His ability to reinvent himself while staying true to his core values has inspired countless artists who embrace their own creative freedom. At the heart of Neil Young's influence is his unwavering authenticity. Whether addressing deeply personal themes or confronting global issues, Neil's music has always been a reflection of his true self. His commitment to honesty and integrity has resonated with fans and artists alike, making him a beacon of artistic and moral courage in an often commercialized industry. As Neil Young continues to create and perform, his influence shows no signs of diminishing. His music remains a source of inspiration for new generations of musicians and fans, offering a roadmap for those who seek to combine artistry with purpose. Through his extensive catalog, his activism, and his innovative projects, Neil's legacy will continue to shape the cultural and musical landscape for years to come. Neil Young's story is one of resilience, creativity, and conviction. From his early days in Winnipeg to his global status as a music icon, Neil has left an indelible mark on the world. His influence on music and pop culture serves as a testament to the enduring power of authenticity and the profound impact of an artist committed to their craft and their ideals.